But this is what I found. This is what I found. First of all, the references to Iliad in all Dylan songs are just two, and they are in one in Tempest and one in Rough and Rowdy Ways. The one, let me start from the one in Tempest. It's you can find it in Duquesne Whistle, but in a way you can start also with the cover of Tempest, because the cover of Tempest is a statue of Athena that you find in Vienna. It's exactly in yes, it's at the door on the Ringstrasse in Vienna. It's at the door of the Austrian parliament, and that is where you find the statue of Athena. Athena, the protector of Ulysses, and so I don't think it's by chance that you find a statue of Athena on the cover of Tempest, which has the greatest number of references to Homer in all Dylan's output. And then the reference to Iliad, as I said, is in Duquesne Whistle. And it's exactly the line that says, where is, also, yes, I'll drag his corpse through the mud. It's in it's in Soon After Midnight. Yes, Soon After Midnight. You have this line, I'll drag his corpse to the mud. And of course, that could be a reference to the corpse of Hector, you know, in Iliad 2022. But because Dylan is Dylan, we can also think of a reference to the Bible, and exactly Isaiah 14:19, where, you know, the prophet says, "But you have been thrown in the mud like a corpse that's being run over." I translate freely here, but this is the meaning of the line. And again, because the source of this line can be traced back both to Iliad and to Isaiah, because this is a recurring thing in Dylan, well, sometimes, most of the times, in fact, you never know if he's, when he quotes Homer, if he is really quoting Homer, or at the same time he's quoting from the Bible. In a way, what Dylan has been trying to do in his last records, most notably Tempest, but also Modern Times to a certain extent, but I would say especially Tempest and Rough and Rowdy Ways, is the old dream of putting together Athens and Jerusalem. I think I'm quoting the title of a famous book by Isaiah Berlin here. And it's an old cultural dream of Western culture that finally Athens and Jerusalem can be brought together. In a way, I don't know whether it was a conscious move, an unconscious move on Dylan's part. You never know. He works with his unconscious most of the time. Therefore, maybe it's a silly question. But this is one of the many things that he has been trying to do. And I hope that I will give you further proof of that. However, this is the only quote, as I said, from the Iliad that you find in Tempest, except for the cover also, the statue of Athena, who's the protector of Ulysses. What about the Odyssey? Well, we know that Dylan has quoted at length, or better, he has given us his outline of the Odyssey in his Noble lecture. The interesting thing in his references to the Odyssey and in the précis that he gives us of the Odyssey is that Odyssey to him becomes a story that concerns not so much Ulysses, but you. You know, it's again the same thing Nothing New on the Western Front. It's about you. It's not about Paul Boehmer. It's not about Ulysses. It's about you. You went through the same experiences of Paul Boehmer, which is the disappointment in your superiors, the disappointment in your parents, the disappointment in the state of your republic, and in the Odyssey, it's because you went through the same adventures and things that Ulysses went through. And Dylan quotes them, you know, you slept with the wrong woman, you annoyed some people that it was much better to live alone. And then when finally you come home, you find that your house is besieged again by people who want to take advantage of your wife. So the war begins again. The war is never really over until your house is finally free. In a way, you know, the Nobel lecture is the culmination of Dylan's references to the Odyssey, because we do not find any reference in Rough and Rowdy Ways. So if we are looking for the presence of Ulysses and the Odyssey in Dylan, it's in a way strictly Tempest. But as I want to say at the end, it is also, I think, because that's my hypothesis, that if you go back to modern times and if you look for Working Man's Blues #2, that's basically Dylan's version of the Odyssey. You know, 6 years before he was more explicit about it in Tempest. Okay, let me go briefly, because we don't have much time, to some references in Tempest. So you have Duquesne Whistle. In Duquesne Whistle, there is a line that says, I'll lead you there myself at the break of day, which is taken from the translation of Robert Fagles of the Odyssey. But it's not about Ulysses, it's about Menelaus. Menelaus that is stuck on the island with Eidothea, the island of Proteus, and Proteus is keeping him a prisoner there. That's a very important theme, because Ulysses and Menelaus will become the same person at the end of Tempest. Then you have Narrow Way, and we looted and we plundered on distant shores, and that is taken from the Odyssey. But there is also, it's a double reference here. It's not just the Odyssey. And but I don't have the time to go at length into it. So let's move to Long and Wasted Years. And you have this line, which is, what a blithering fool it took me for. And that is from Odyssey 9, 419, again in the translation of Robert Fagles. And this is about Odysseus and Polyphemus. But this is not what Dylan sings, because this is the printed text. Dylan sings a different lines. He sings, my enemy crashed into the dust, stopped dead in his tracks, and he lost his last, he was round down hard. So that's not the first time that Dylan sings a text that is different from the printed one. And then you have early Roman kings, the line, I'll dress up your wounds with a blood-clotted rag. And that comes from Walt Whitman. But then, you know, if you read the entire line, the entire stanza, and you come from I'll strip you of life, then you see that those lines come from Odyssey 9. And again, it's the episode of Polyphemus. So the struggle of Ulysses against Polyphemus matches with Whitman's lines about the Civil War and his role as a wound dresser in the Civil War. But where everything comes, you know, together is the final song of Tempest, is Roll On John. In Roll On John, everything comes together because you have, again, Menelaus on the island of Proteus, Menelaus and Eidothea. And at the same time, you have John, who can be John the Revelator, who's stuck on the island of Patmos because he was persecuted. And you have John Lennon, who was stuck on the island of Manhattan by Richard Nixon, who had unleashed the FBI against him, and the FBI was piling up, a huge dossier, a huge file on Lennon. This is where, in a way, there are three lines in Roland John that relate to the story of Ulysses and Menelaus, but especially Menelaus. Menelaus comes home to an unfaithful wife, and Ulysses comes home to a faithful wife, but it's still a matter of homecoming. But Roland John, whom I admitted, it's not necessarily the best song in Dylan's canon, it's the music is a little sloppy, but the text is not. The text is where the whole album comes together in the idea of not making any difference between, so to speak, John of the Revelator, John of Patmos, Ulysses, Menelaus, and John Lennon. In Dylan, everything happens at the same time. So the Odyssey is really about him, and it is really about you, including everybody. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alessandro.
Thank you.
Would you like to ask a question?
I think, shall we move on to